Hey guys, Chelsea here. Now this video is going to be a bit unique. I'm actually going to be looking at tanks, but I'm actually going to be looking at the starter tanks for each faction, for each campaign. I've used all of them to varying degrees. So like something like the Puma, the Stuart, all of them. I've used all of them, and I'm just going to rate them. Basically, I'm just going to go through each campaign and say which one's good for a new player. Now, this is going to be kind of a new player guide, so you're going to be seeing stuff like the Panzer II, the T60. Now, what am I going to say about a new player tank? I'm not going to be including stuff like the BA11, the premium stuff. I'm not going to be including stuff like the T26. I'm not going to be including any fighters or anything like that. I'm not even going to be including the Damia. I'm going to be including the A13. Basically, it's just more or less looking at each tank and saying how good is it for a new player, and basically just giving it a ranking kind of out of 10 of what's good about it, what's bad about it, and how good it is for a new player. Anyways, we're going to be starting off with the Moscow tank, so let us begin. Starting with the Soviets, it's going to be the T60. Now, the T60, of course, has a crew of 2. It has an autocannon, as well as a DT, which is, in my opinion, the worst. Well, it's actually the second worst, in my opinion. It's got a bit of front, it's got some front armor, but it's not good against anything other than a Panzer II in terms of anti-tank. It's really good against the infantry, but it's not. If you come across anything which has any semblance of a weapon, like, for example, the Panzer IV B, even the Panzer IV B, with a 37mm gun, or even the Panzer III E, 4J, 3J, 3J, 4E, anything really with the F1, or even the Panzer, the F1, all of that. You come across any tank like that, or even in any custom match, which, if you do use this in a custom match, God, you've got stones. But if you come across anything with a heavy cannon, then you're fucked. You're basically fucked with this thing. Like, it's not that good. Really, the autocannon is really only good against infantry, which, yeah, it had a very long reload as well, if I remember correctly. Which is really the main problem with it. It's got a lot of ammo, but the reload takes like 10 minutes. So, yeah. You're going to be mostly using the DT, which, it's a DT, which, it's fine. The DT's fine. But, yeah, nothing, the cannon's really good as well against the infantry, but it takes a year to reload. It doesn't have much armor, especially, it has some good frontal armor here, but most of it, which covers the driver, and it also has some good armor around this. But most of the time, if you get flanked on, you're fucked, because you've only got 50mm protecting the driver's head. Gunner can probably get away with it, but you can still take a few hits from the side. Yeah. So overall, not a good starting tank. It's good against infantry, but it's not a good starting tank. Anyways, let's move on to the Axis. In a similar vein, the Axis have the Panzer II. Now, the Panzer II is essentially the exact same thing, only with a slightly different cannon. Now, this cannon actually has a lot less ammo. It has a better machine gun as well, though. It has a much better machine gun with the MG34. But this autocannon is slightly better. It has less ammo, but it reloads quicker. It's got less armor, but it's got it's got better side armor with the 14, but worse front armor with only 20 instead of the 35. Really, this thing is it's kind of like apples and pears. It's basically the exact same thing. Pretty good for, it's got a decent autocannon for good, so it's good against the infantry, and it's good against T60s, but that's it. Using this against anything with armor, sorry about that, I just woke up. Using this against anything with armor is kind of a bit of a pain, but yeah. It does say it has a crew of 3, so it's got that advantage over the T60. Anyways, let's move on to Normandy. For Normandy, no, it's not the Jumbo. I'm going to have to talk about the Stuart. Now, the Stuart is a pretty bad tank. It's really not that good in Normandy. Everything, I think I put this at number 9, only being beat as the worst, when I talk about the 10 Normandy bait unlock tanks, I put the Stuart in at number 9, I believe. And there's not much to say about it. The armor's quite weak at the front. Like, the only good protection is here, which just protects the suspension, like the transmission. You shoot here and here, and they're dead. That's all you do. Or you shoot from around here to break down and it brings the tank down. Really weak cannon, just a really weak stuff in general. It's generally just a pretty bad tank. Now, the only problem with the big problem with the Stuart is it's unlocked it's really unlocked early, and the tanks of Normandy, especially stuff like the Panzer IV, the Panzer III, and the Panther, just outclass this in every regard. Even the Puma's better than this. Like, it's basically just the runt of the litter of the Allied tanks. Like, the Scott, it has uses. Like, it has uses. It's good on D-Day. It's good on maps like Omir. You know, even the M10, you know, it's great against Panthers. And any tank. It's great against tanks. Not so much against the infantry, but it's great against tanks. And then, of course, you have stuff like the Shermans, which are just good against everything. The Stuart just does not have anything. Now, I know it is a scout tank, but it's not that good against really anything. The cannon's not effective. Really only effective against Pumas, actually. And yeah, it's just not really that good. Anyways, let's move on again at the next tank, which is the Axis. So the Axis have the Puma. Now, the Puma's actually something weird. It's actually quite weird. It's bad if you're using... It's a really bad starter tank. However, it's not a bad tank. Now, the thing is, the Puma's main problem is that many new players do not know its strength, and will use this like a tank. They'll use this like a Panzer IV. They're supposed to use a Panzer IV H. They'll use it like they're supposed, like, you know, a Panther or a Panzer IV H, and they'll get instantly destroyed. But the problem is, the Puma's main strength is really better utilised by a late game player. People who know how to use this thing get better usage out of it. As, you know, I've seen some really good Puma plays, and I've seen Pumas destroy Jumbos because they've been really good. Because these Pumas have been incredibly good, and they've used their weakness against their strengths to their advantage. That being that the Puma is incredibly fast, and it can flank around targets. Which is why I actually put it quite high on my list, because Pumas can have some really good... You can make some really good Puma plays with this thing. Other than that, it's, you know, it's really lightly armoured, other than like this tiny front plate. Hitting anywhere on the side cranks it up immediately, which, yeah. But yeah, it's a pretty bad... It's an okay tank, but it's a really bad starter tank, because most new players are going to see this and go, oh, it's going to be a big tank, you can take bullets and stuff like that. Use it like something like really recklessly and get insta-nuked by someone in a jumbo, right? You have to play with this thing, you have to play it smart. So that's why I'm saying it's a bad starter tank, but it's a good tank overall, but a bad starter tank. Anyways, let's move to Berlin. In an opposite vein, we have the T-34-85. Now, this is, of course, the D5T version, which is strong. It's a strong tank, but Obviously, it's outclassed by the 85 version, but, you know, it's capable. It's a pretty good tank. Real problem is it has the DT, which is a really bad cannon in my opinion. It's a really bad machine gun. Other than that, it's actually pretty good. Like, it's got a good primary weapon with the 75mm. Has not really, like, the DT's pretty bad. I do not like the DT machine guns. But we'll get on to that later. We'll talk about something else worse later. The thing is, it's a T-34 85. Nothing. This is actually a really good tank, and it's a really good starter tank in my opinion, because you're not going to get instant nuked immediately by most vehicles, especially if you go on customs. And it's not the best tank in the game. Like, it's not the best tank. It's not the worst tank. It's a strong tank. Anyways, let's move on to the next tank. For the Axis, I'm going to have to go with, it's going to have to be the J. Now, the problem with the J, this is going to be a tale of two campaigns. Now, the Panzer IV J is great in Normandy. If you use this in Normandy, it's great. Now, I'm not going to be comparing the Normandy version. I'm going to have to compare the version in Berlin. But the version in Berlin isn't the best. Like, it's good, it's fine, but the problem is it's against tanks that eat it alive. So it's a good tank, but it's against tanks that destroy it. Like the Panzer IV, not the Panzer IV, the T-34 85s just eat these things alive. If you ever played Company of Heroes, you'll know how good the 85mm tanks are. And the Panzer IV J just does not. I would say if this was the H, maybe it would be better. But I think this is a good tank, a great tank, but it's in the wrong campaign. It's not as good as it was as it is in Normandy. Like, in Normandy, it's a pretty solid tank, other than, of course, the turn speed. But in terms of, like, protection in, like, you end up having to basically, you know, if you get flanked, you're fucked. And even then, Panzerfausts are so common, and people who use Panzerfausts are really common in Berlin, so it's kind of you're at a detriment in Berlin when you're using these things. Anyways, let's move on to Tunisia, which, oh dear, there's a few tanks in Tunisia which I'm not going to be fond of. Oh dear. For Tunisia, there is the first tank is the A13. Now, the cruiser, it's fine. It's a fine starting tank. It has a Vickers, which, it's got a 2-pounder gun, which is fine. The 2-pounder's not too bad. 40mm should, you know, acceptable, you know, starting tank. It's a fine starting tank, actually. It's just basically, it's an okay starting tank. You get the Damia, which is, afterwards, but yeah, it's a fine starting tank. The only problem is, it doesn't have much turret armor, so the turret gets knocked out quite quickly. It doesn't really have much armor in general, other than this, like, one slab of 30mm. However, when we compare it to what the Axis has, oh boy, this thing is actually god tier. Speaking of, this thing is awful. It's loud. This is the, oh Jesus Christ, this thing is loud. But this thing is so awful. Like, this is actually the worst. I would say this is the worst armored vehicle in the game, and it's no contest. The AB-41 is god awful. There's a reason why. I'm just gonna have to get rid of it because that sound. It's so annoying. That sound. You have the worst. The worst thing, which is the Braider. The Braider does, like, if you don't know, the Braider only has like 24 rounds, right? 24 machine gun rounds. Like, that is appalling for a machine gun. So you're constantly reloading with this thing. And then you get the fucking autocannon, which only has 6 rounds. 6 rounds. I'm going to have to change over to infantry because I don't want to get a headache. It uses 6 rounds. It has a 6 round thing, right? 6 rounds. And then 4. And it's like 24, something like that. Fucking machine gun rounds. So you only have 30 rounds to fire. You know, as a quick burst. For reference, I'm going to go over to the Panzer II. The Panzer II had an MG34, which has about 150, and 10 rounds on the main cannon. And the T60, which is another autocannon, had about 60, and then 63 on the DT. This thing is really just appalling, which is why I think it's one of the not only just the worst tank in the game. It's not only bad for beginners. It's bad for anyone. Honestly, this thing is just so much better. Like, honestly, I would take this fucking T14 over this any day of the week. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Leave your thoughts in the comments on these tanks, really. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.